Hey everyone, happy 2023! It is January, so you know I'm going to be going through my top 5 best and worst films of the year of 2022. I'm a little unhappy with the lists, both the good and the bad, because while there were stuff that I really liked and disliked this year, there's definitely a few that I'm a little bit iffy on. And I saw a good number of films this year. I was well over 130 something films. And you know me, I like to start out with the worsts. And there were a bunch this year that were just mediocre to really kind of awful. Like, it's kind of interesting because I've watched a bunch of different other people's lists of this nature and been comparing, and there are definitely going to be some similar. But I've heard so many of them talk about how great the horror films were this year, and yeah, no, I could have easily made this bottom 5 just horror films and been perfectly happy with that. In fact, it kind of almost is. But yeah, today we'll be looking at my top 5 worst films of 2022. The School of Good and Evil. Yeah, like I said, this is one I could see myself changing my mind on this in like a couple months if I rewatch it and be like, you know what, it really wasn't that bad. I might move it up. Because this spot was originally going to go to The Gray Man. But right before I watched The School of Good and Evil, I rewatched The Gray Man, and I'm like, it's still terrible. But there's one or two things that I really do have to give it credit for. Whereas with The School of Good and Evil, there's not really much of anything to give it credit for. It is an incredibly bland, incredibly boring, stupid, uninteresting, ugly film. And like the easiest way to surmise what is The School of Good and Evil, it's like it's a shitty version of Harry Potter. Like there are better versions of this idea, because the idea is
The School for Good and Evil, where the true story behind every great fairy tale begins. The School for Good trains the heroes. The School for Evil, the villains.
honestly, The Descendants from the Disney Channel is a better version of this idea. And I don't like those films either. But those at least are somewhat watchable and have some elements and depth to it, whereas this has nothing.
It's happening. This is it! This is real!
Like, it tries to pretend like it has depth, that it's about showing that the world is more gray. Like, it's like, these good people have a little darkness in them, and the dark people have a little goodness in them, and it's like, yeah, but that's not what you're showing me. Like, you have a school full of evil people who are evil for the sake of being evil. And you have a school full of goody-goodies who are all goody-goodies. The most evil thing they do is start a fight with the evil people. A fight that technically the evil people started when one of the main girls who was in the School of Evil attacked the School of Good. So, if anything, they were just setting up defenses and retaliating. Like, that was the crux of the whole thing, is so you had to get the good guys to attack first so that they can become the bad guys. And it's like, but you attacked them first, so they're still just... It was such a dumb logic. It was so annoying and stupid and ugly and boring, and just nothing in this really worked. Bad acting, bad writing. Everything that you knew could happen was going to happen. You knew everything that was going on. They tried to also make it like the main girls are able to succeed because they're both a little good and a little evil. Meanwhile, presenting both of them like they're pretty good. Like, the girl that went to the School of Good was almost a cupcake. Like, she was so goody too. She was every single person she came across, like, how can I help you? And then you have the girl who ended up at the School of Evil, who was still a pretty good person, who just got a little bit of power mad.
It's all I've ever wanted, Aggie. I can't settle for an ordinary life. I'm tired of being pathetic little Sophie.
You can be more than you ever dreamed you could be.
And it's like, oh, well, I can't have the dream life I wanted. I'm just gonna get a little bit of vengeance. It's like, no, nope, she's still a pretty good girl, and she still did the right thing in the end and everything. So it's like they didn't succeed in anything they were really trying to do. And it was just so dull and so poorly put together. Just, yeah, definitely a skip. Moonfall. Yeah, I'm not really sure if I would class this as a horror film or a disaster film. I will call it a bore fest. Like first off, the science in this film makes no freaking sense. Like, the reality is, if the moon even moved even a little bit, we would all probably be dead. Like, let alone if the moon was falling towards us. Like, I think we would long be dead before we'd even have to worry about the moon colliding with Earth. And then just all of the stuff about the moon and it being a space station and just, ugh.
Dealing with an intelligent entity
that they kept hidden for 50 years. And now, it's too late to stop.
And then you have the actors and the performances. And this is a film that is a B-level schlock plot. Like, this is a goofy idea and a goofy-ass film, and they play this as freaking straight-laced as they can. Like, you got a group of actors who have no ability to provide any sort of levity or lightness to their speech. They can only speak as serious as possible. It's like they take it so seriously, and so it sucks out any fun that could be had with this plot. There's supposed to be, a little bit of brevity in the story, a little bit of lightheartedness, and you don't get that. And then it's really annoying, because that's probably been Roland Emmerich's biggest fault in his films since, is that, like, ever since Independence Day, he's been trying to recapture that without really fully understanding why Independence Day really works. Like, Independence Day really works because you have the brevity and the lightheartedness of Will Smith and Jeff Goldblum, who, even when giving serious performances, can add a level of lightheartedness to their voice. Will Smith used to be the guy that could charm an entire room with just a smile. We also found out this year he is a guy who can turn an entire room against him with just a slap. But it's like every film since then he's had a hard time repeating that. And this one was easily the worst of his. Like, just nothing in it works in any way, shape, or form. You need something of that nature in this, and the closest you have is the comic relief character, who is never funny or interesting or well done in this.
An emergency meeting is being called at our usual place immediately. 3 bagels.
It's on airplane mode.
And then you have everything about the moon being hollow, and us being aliens, and there being a war, and just... oh, and then they hint at the possibility of a sequel, and it's like, nobody wants a sequel to this. Emmerich, you're going to be lucky if you ever get to direct a film again. Like, you sure as heck are not getting another $100 million budget ever again. And that is a shame to an extent, because he is like one of the only people making that kind of film anymore. He just wasn't very good at it. I would like to see someone who's actually decent at making that kind of film doing that. Like, I would love more films in that style. Like, we had The Wandering Earth a couple of years ago by from China, which was absolutely perfect and a great version of this kind of story. But, hopefully someone will step up and fill that role and become the disaster survival piece director in Emmerich's place. Who knows? We will see. Shark Side of the Moon. Yeah, I only watched this because it had the dumbest title I've ever heard. Like, Jesus. And yeah, it's pretty terrible. It's basically like an asylum film, like one of the worst asylum films. It's like the Russians were making genetically enhanced humanoid sharks who they then sent to the moon.
Everyone ready to go to the moon?
5, 4,
And then, like, they've been fighting to get back to Earth, and they're now trying to steal this American space shuttle.
Captain, I think you should see this.
Back to the ship!
While also fighting against their creator and his daughter, who's a half-human, half-shark hybrid.
Welcome to them.
And just... it's as terrible as it sounds. It's awfully directed, terribly shot, bad effects, bad makeup, bad storytelling. But it's so stupid, it's kind of fun.
Protect the ship at all costs!
It's either us or them.
Like, it's one that I'm like, I can't really full-on hate, because I knew what I was getting. It gives you exactly what you're expecting when you hear a title like Shark Side of the Moon. Like, it's the sea-level schlock, and I'm here for it. Like, it's not good. I can't pretend that it was a good film in any way, but it was watchable. I certainly would probably rewatch that before I would rewatch any of the others on my bottom 5. Like, it's not a good film in any stretch of the word, but it's just, you know, has some moments in it that just stand out as like, oh god, I can't believe they did that. Halloween Ends. What the heck happened with this film? Like, seriously, I went and had to look up if it was the same director and writers, because this did not feel like it was made by the same people. Like, nothing in this film worked. Not a single thing. The directing is weird. It's shot extremely weird. The acting is all over the place. Jamie Lee Curtis's character has a completely different version of her than I've seen in any other of the Halloween films. Like, for whatever reason, she's like gave up on chasing after Michael Myers and is now, you know, teaching people to deal with stress, and wrote a book, and is just being a super friendly grandma to her granddaughter. And I'm like, didn't you watch your daughter get murdered at the last one?
4 years ago, Michael Myers murdered 43 people. And he vanished without a trace.
You know Michael is still alive, right? He got away. You know this. You of all people would know that he's still alive somewhere. And you didn't, you know, double down and start to hunt him type of thing. Like, you just let it go and just went about your life like nothing happened. Really. The woman who spent 30 years preparing to deal with him after he attacked you for less than an hour one night watches her daughter get murdered in front of her eyes and then proceeds to give up. Like, this should have become a hunting film. Like, this should have turned into, like, Supernatural, where they were following rumors about where Michael Myers might be and trying to hunt him down.
Time to put the boogeyman to bed.
And something like that. Like, I could honestly write a better version of this film without even trying. Because literally, you take that idea, but you just have Michael in a new town killing new people, and then at the very towards the end, a van just shows up, and Jamie Lee Curtis and her granddaughter character step out with shotguns and blow Michael Myers to smithereens. Like, that's how you end this fucking trilogy. You don't add a character who's completely unimportant that Michael Myers will possess.
It's Halloween. We're gonna have a good time tonight.
All he does is make the movie worse, because he has in the idea that Michael Myers might be able to somewhat possess people and convince them to do evil things. And it's like, we already tried that. That was what happened at the end of Halloween 4. And they decided it was so stupid they weren't going to do it for Halloween 5. And at least if they had done it back then, it would have been interesting, because it would have been little 9-year-old, you know, Jamie, who is this, you know, a 9-year-old little girl killing people like Michael Myers. Like, that would have been interesting, unlike freaking 20-something-year-old mama's boy that we got in this one. Like, Nobody wants this character. Nobody needed this character. It adds nothing to this film except to lengthen the runtime, which is already too long as it was. It has a terrible ending. Like, she captures Michael, goes to get him killed, and a crowd of people just appear to help her with that? Like, oh. And it sucks because it takes the entire trilogy that this guy created, starting with the 2018 Halloween, and it just flushes it all down the toilet into complete garbage. And the trilogy could have been decent. Like, there were some good things in Kills. Like, Halloween Kills is bad, but it's not so bad to ruin the series. But Ends is so terrible that it just makes the other two worse. Best analogy I can have for the entire trilogy is it's like you went to a 5-star restaurant to have a first meal, which is what the 2018 film, and then when you get to the second course, which is Kills, you start to feel weird in your stomach, and you slowly start to realize that you got food poisoning. And then by the time you get to Halloween Ends, you're at the third course, and you're rushing to the restroom, trying desperately hard not to shit your pants. And that's what Halloween Ends feels like. It feels like a franchise that has just shit its pants. And, like, it's not the worst Halloween film, but that is an incredibly low bar. Like, that bar is 10 feet below ground. Like, it's really hard to beat out Rob Zombie's Halloween 2 or Halloween Resurrection. Like, those are extremely low bars to get below. And this one tries so hard to go below that, and just... it's disgusting. Now, for some dishonorable mentions. Like I said, I could have put a bunch of horror movies down here at the bottom, because there was a lot of terrible ones. Firestarter was pretty awful. Like, it wasn't as... I don't think it was as god-awful as some people made it out to be. It's just mostly boring, and I nearly fell asleep during parts of it. Bring It On, Cheer or Die, which is a very low-budget fusion of horror and the Bring It On franchise, which sadly was a way too much Bring It On and not enough horror. And it's a really badly acted, really badly written. The kills are not good. Though once the killers are revealed, it actually gets a little better by then. And I can't say I despise it, even though I didn't like any part of it. The Studio 666, which is the Foo Fighters in a haunted house story, which, fair point to them, they did fine in the film. The film is just way too long and not funny and not well paced, but it has some really nice gory kills, and the music is excellent. The one that I'm shocked, because I've seen a bunch of people putting this in their top 10 list, and I do not get why, is Scream. So the 2022 Scream has gotten lots of love and lots of praise. And hear me out. I understand most of it. Like, I really liked Scream until we found out who the killers were and what their motivations was. Because once you found that out, the entire film just... for me. It just became a wet fart. Like, the killer's motivation was they were fans of the Stab franchise, the film within a film based off the killings in this. And the 8th film of the Stab franchise was so terrible and so bad that they're like, there will never be another sequel. We need them to reboot it. So they came up with this elaborate plan. I know, let's get the daughter of Billy Loomis, the killer from the first film, get her to go to the same town that her dad died in, kill a bunch of people, blame it on her. Maybe we get Sydney to show up, and then we kill her as well and get it blamed on this girl, and that somehow will reboot the franchise? First off, why would any of that reboot the franchise? Second of all, who the hell is that invested in a film, in a franchise, especially a horror franchise, 8 films in, when we know they have been bad since at least Stab 5? Because Scream 4 told us how bad Stab 5 was, and that it was very poorly received, because Sidney Prescott would not let them use her image or any of her events of her life anymore. Like, it is one of the dumbest plot lines I've ever heard. Like, I know I was just complaining about Halloween Ends being bad, and that one was the 13th. I'm just gonna complain about it on the internet. I'm not gonna go on a killing spree in the hopes of restarting the Halloween franchise. Granted, that's a series that doesn't need to be rebooted again. It's been rebooted enough. Let it die, please. Like, and that's annoying because the rest of the film was actually fairly decent. The new leads were good. The story was interesting. I mean, it was just Scream 4 again, but at least had some stuff going for it. But that motivation and that reasoning and that stupid ass plan, just, oh, I wish the rest of the film had been as bad as that, so I could have put it in my bottom 5. Like, if any other part of the film had been as bad as that reveal, this would have easily been in my bottom 5. There was also a bunch of films that the second you heard about them, like, this isn't going to be good. There's no way this will be good. You had, Morbius and Fantastic Beasts, The Secrets of Dumbledore, Jurassic World Dominion, League of Super Pets, Zombie 3, which surprisingly is actually the best of the Disney Channel zombie films. That's not much of a compliment, but it's at least a little bit more watchable than 1 and 2. You had Don't Worry Darling, which, like, I knew it's never gonna be my cup of tea, but, like, it falls apart once you get to the twist and figure out what's going on, and it doesn't ever get any better from that point on. Like, there's some definitely decent directing in it. There's one scene in particular that stands out for me as being, like, the best scene in the entire film, where she is cleaning a glass window and the wall behind her just starts to squeeze in and just starts pressing her against the glass, threatening to crush her. That scene is awesome. The rest of the film is not. And it was interesting because I watched the film and I went and was getting ready for bed and I took a shower, and in the shower I immediately thought of a way to fix the film and make it better, which is to add another twist to the end, because the first twist a lot of people saw coming. Like, I knew a lot of people that watched the trailer and immediately knew what the twist was from the trailer. It didn't help that we did the same twist not that long ago with a Matthew McConaughey film. So to have the almost identical twist just didn't work. And I'm like, well, if you add in this one little tiny element, and it would help that third act be a little bit more interesting and a little bit more dynamic, and it wouldn't even have to change the plot too much. I don't know if it would work or not, but the fact that I could think of a better thing for this film in 5 seconds really makes me wish that the writers and director had taken another couple passes at the script. Like, I like Olivia Wilde. I think she could have a potential to be a really good director. I think this one was let down by bad writing and believing that the twist that it had would be strong enough to make that third act chase sequence work. The Death on the Nile, which is elements of that film could have been great. It's held back by 2 things. First off is the really bad blue screening effects for the backgrounds, because they clearly couldn't, film on the Nile River, but they also couldn't seemingly get good green screen effect for it for some reason. And the second is the other 3 leads besides Kenneth Branagh, because most of the cast is actually pretty stellar, and Kenneth Branagh is giving and the rest of the cast are giving this Shakespearean level performing for the royal family kind of performance, and then you have Gal Gadot, Armie Hammer, and Emma Mackey, and they all are absolutely awful in this. They feel like they are on a really terrible soap opera that is going to get canceled after a week of airing. Gal Gadot especially, but all of them are so bad, and literally, even without thinking about it too hard, you could tell from their performances, so it's okay, something about them is going to be what the twist is at the end, and it's there was the 355, which was a female-led spy flip, which put me to sleep almost. Like, it was so boring and uninteresting. There was The Gray Man, which actually was originally going to be on the bottom 5 list. It's an incredibly boring-ass film. Like, it's got Ryan Gosling giving a one-note performance. It's got boring action, boring set pieces. I couldn't care less about anything that's going on. The one real saving grace in this is Chris Evans' performance as the villain. He is pretty stellar in this and makes the film watchable, but the rest of the film is just awful from start to finish.
You know all those rules you guys are always trying to work your way around? They don't mean dick to me.
So unless you want our names spilled across every news alert, on every phone, in every pocket on Earth,
shut up and go sit in the corner. Forget about the Vicodin.
Why are you walking like that?
Because I got shot in the ass, Suzanne!
The Princess from Hulu was pretty bad. Like, it was trying so desperately to be The Raid, but it didn't really succeed in it. And part of that is just, like, watching it, I never remotely felt like she was in any danger whatsoever. Like, in The Raid, you're constantly worried that this guy's gonna die, because you watched a whole bunch of people die at the start of the story that were his fellow officers. And this, like, the princess feels immortal. Like, every time she gets in a little bit of trouble, she immediately gets out of it with little to minimum effort. And it's just like, really? Why? There was Rob Zombie's The Munsters, which I've seen some people say as the worst film of the year. I get that. I think it's okay. It has some it's got some really good set designs. It has some decent ideas. It's just really poorly directed and really poorly acted. There was also Confess Fletch, which is a reboot-quel with John Hamm. Props to John Hamm for being the person to step up and try to fill that role. If there was anyone that could have made this character work, John Hamm is probably the best person to do that. But it's like, it doesn't work without Chevy Chase, and I honestly don't even know if it really worked with Chevy Chase. It's like, it was very much a product of that time frame, of the 80s, of the 70s, when you could have this kind of character. It really does not work in the modern age, and it doesn't help that he has a really poor script and an uninteresting mystery. And I'm like, we had a lot of mystery films, and that one was just probably one of the more boring ones. And it's like, I also watched a bunch of, the bad Christmas film, made-for-TV Christmas films, and a lot of that stuff. The only one that I would really need to mention and I have to bring up was Dolly Parton's Mountain Magic Christmas. I love you, Dolly Parton. You are a queen. You are a diva. I would put you up there with the best of all time of male or female country singers. You are better than this. You don't have to do this crap. Like, I don't care who convinced you this was a good idea. You are way above this stuff, and you do not need to do this garbage. Like, God, it was so bad. All of the songs were terrible. She sang great, but all of the songs were so terrible. All of the ideas were terrible. All of the performances were terrible. It was cringe from start to finish. Honestly, could have been my number one if I counted made-for-TV movies as part of the list. But it isn't, so let's move on to the actual number one. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. One of the channels I watched did the top 10 worst horror films of the year, and they had Halloween Ends as their number 1 and Texas Chainsaw Massacre as their number 10. And they're like, Halloween Ends is worse because it not only is it a bad film, it ruins this trilogy that was set up. And I completely get that, and I can totally see putting Halloween Ends over Texas Chainsaw for that reason. But for me, it's like there is still maybe a kernel of something interesting in Halloween Ends. If for nothing else than that final confrontation between Jamie Lee Curtis's character and Michael Myers. In Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there was literally nothing redeeming about it. There's not a single tiny little thing that you can grasp on as being even remotely interesting or remotely good. All of the characters are god-awful. They are the worst people.
Try anything and you're canceled, bro.
Leatherface doesn't look great. He somehow kept a chainsaw in a wall for 30, 40 years, but then pulls it out and it just starts automatically with no trouble whatsoever. They went and brought back the main girl from the first film to come back and get revenge, you know, a la Halloween, and having Jamie Lee Curtis come back. Except two things. First off, the actress that played the girl in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre has been dead for years, so they just got a random woman to play that part. And second of all, she doesn't do anything. She fires a shot at Leatherface. He looks at her, doesn't recognize her at all, and she realizes how unimportant she is to this person who has screwed up her entire life.
Say my name. Say you know me. Say you know what you did to my friends. You don't remember me.
And then he immediately kills her. Like, they tried a similar thing in Halloween Kills last year with realizing that Michael doesn't give a damn about Laurie Strode in any way, shape, or form. And it's like, maybe, but he keeps going after her apparently, like anytime he sees her. So it didn't work in that one, and it works even less in this one. Just ugly shot, horribly written, horribly acted, horribly put together. There is not a single saving grace in the entire film. And I knew what I was getting into, because there hasn't been a single good Texas Chainsaw Massacre sequel. Like, the closest we got to anything good from that was the reboot. And even that isn't that good. Like, the first film is excellent, and then every film after it is just worse and worse and worse. This, honestly, is almost the worst in the entire franchise. So close. It's like, the only thing worse than that is the Leatherface prequel that had nothing to do with the entire franchise. He only becomes Leatherface kind of sort of at the end, and it's boring and ugly and poorly shot and just unwatchable from start to finish. And this is also mostly unwatchable, but not quite as bad. But it's like this. They're like so close. And yeah, that is my worst film of 2022. What did you all think? Did you like some of these films? Did you hate some films? Were there films that you saw that you thought were way worse than this? Let me know in the comments below. Happy watching, happy reading. I will see you all in the top 5 very soon. Bye!